Past lessons are actually up on the YouTube page, so you can always go back and look at that stuff. Um, so the kinetic typography, we looked at some examples last class. Um, and I gave you guys some sites that are on the LMS that you can look at. We also looked at, let me go in. The idea of laying out how you might want your let's see, how you might want your storyboard to be. So remember, the first phase is that you would write your script. Remember, it's only 10-15 seconds long, right? So we're not going for a full-on, biography. We're just doing a short narrative. And the option is that you can also choose a 10 or 15-second clip from your favorite source, like a movie or TV show, but I still have to give it the thumbs up either way. Also, you want to think about, and I haven't had this problem at Aloni. I have it more at LMC with the content, because they're definitely. I love both the schools, but there's definitely a different vibe to every school and every cohort. So, just to be fair, I have to say it here as well, which is just be mindful of the content. In other words, try not to have the use of, shall we say, colorful metaphors. Cursing. Keep it professional. I mean, not that you aren't going to have it, within there, or that it's not a part of society, but when you're doing stuff for your demo reel, for your portfolio, you're always thinking of, you want more people to enjoy it. I'm not going to turn people off by it, So that's just something to consider. So you'd write your narrative. You'd practice your narrative a few times. Excuse me. And once you'd have it, then you storyboard it, and you can use Illustrator. This is what you would turn in. And I'd started it in the last class, and we talked about it, and you can look at the previous video that's posted up. And what you're doing is not trying to go and show in a storyboard every single frame. You're trying to show different points, and then you'd work your way on how to get there, right? So at some point I'd have this, if this were my storyboard. At some point, like in the next phase, it transition to the next block of text and maybe a little logo or icon, and so on and so forth. Excuse me. And then with each one, you want to have a little description. It doesn't have to be ridiculously detailed. You want it to be short and concise, right? The way you should do your storyboards is, let's say you're working on a team, a group of other artists and different people, and that artist, like you're out sick today, right? So your team has to work on it. You shouldn't have to stand next to your storyboard and tell them everything that's going on, because then it's not an effective storyboard. It should stand on its own. Imagine if you're reading a book and you have to have the author sitting next to you telling you what the character's doing or what's going, then it's not a really good book, right? Or a director sitting next to you while you're watching the movie. Oh, this is where it's like, that doesn't work, right? So your storyboard is the same way. It should stand on its own so that the world doesn't stop if you're not there. Other people can pick up the baton and kind of keep going with it. So you want to have the details that are important so that someone could interpret them and run with it and not have a whole bunch of question marks floating above their head. It's also a good time to think about your fonts, which we talked about, right? So, the two main things I want you guys to think about in doing this that usually people have a problem with: clean and simple. Okay? If it has too much stuff going on, if there's hyper-realistic images, if it's hard to follow, then it doesn't work. At the end of the day, you're communicating. And you're choosing fonts that fit what the word or emotion is that you're trying to get, or its importance. Just like in graphic design, right? In this example here, I have animation as more of a sort of moving, kind of playful font with a little guy running across. Video games is more of this retro, even though it's outlined, it's more of this retro blocky font, kind of like old school video games, arcades kind of stuff. I could emphasize love more by having a different font. It depends on what I'm trying to emphasize, what I'm trying to show, and how important it is. The other major thing is your goal is not to fill up the entire screen. Okay? Not all the time, at least. You want to, and we'll talk about that, but you want to keep negative space around things when you can. So, to give you an example, if I look at this, I'm in After Effects, and we're going to go over, I'm going to start you off by showing you how to do some of these today. Excuse me. I'm going to play this one just so you can kind of see, so eyes up front. So I'm going to play this. I haven't put the sound in yet. That's something else we went over last time. How to record your sound in Audition and do cleanup. I posted the video. Actually, I made the video and posted it up. So something simple, and then it transitions into whatever else. So I'll play that again. It's like, come on. It's acting weird on me, of course. So it goes in, hello, and we have these different animations coming in. You see that? Have a little motion blur. Then it rotates and scales down, blocks out. So now I have this next section. Then it goes to the transition. That would be the next set of information. Okay. But that's the general idea of what we're going to kind of run through today, is how to start to do that. But you have to have that idea first, right? So that you know where you're going to go with it. Try not to go too nuts. I put that in just to show, like, oh, I could put an illustrated icon or whatever. I want to keep it simple in there. I could even like bring in eyes so it would wink, you know, and just have it like that. There's lots of different things I could do. But I have to have it kind of planned out. The more text you have, the less you want to Bob Ross it with just, I'll just toss stuff in and have happy mistakes and see what happens. It's like, not so much. So you have to kind of plan it out. But that's what we're going to go over today to get you guys started, is how to get to this point and how to start working with text and compositions and breaking this up. Okay. Any questions so far? Guys, good? So why don't, right now, if you don't have it open, open up Illustrator. Sure.
I've been working in After Effects for a long time, and I've never seen it go underneath the dock like that. Notice how the window is completely gone. I've like restarted my computer and everything, and I can't figure out how to fix it.
Yes. That is weird. Oops, there you go.
It's the strangest thing.
Let me see if we can just reset the workspace. What's going on? Oh, we're still in there. Gesundheit.
Strange, right?
Okay, so there's that. Now, is it just that, or?
It's just After Effects.
Shoot, almost had it. Hold on. Okay, I think I know. Hold on. It's weird that it held that as a preset, but.
No worries, I'll look it up. I just
Well,
wanted to
okay.
get.
Yeah, but it's weird, yeah, because it blocks you from.
Yeah, I tried like entering full screen and everything won't let me at all.
Let me just try. Oh, so I see you. Custom. If you could.
That's just the resolution for.
Just the resolution for
yeah.
that.
I'll figure it out. Thank
Check
you.
it out. If you can't figure it out by then, we'll just look it up online.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, so I want to make a new project. And it brings me to this window where we have new composition from footage. I'm just going to do a new composition, but a composition is, what we're doing in After Effects is compositing. And compositing is basically taking multiple things and putting them together in any way that we want. whether it be layers, whether it be linear, one after the other, mixture. So we want a new composition. I'm going to click on that. And then it pulls up this window here. And I'm going to tell you what settings we're going to use for it. So the preset I'm going to use is HDTV 1080 29.97, and that's the frames. So we're doing HDTV 1080 29.97. And what this is basically saying is, depending on what the well, how big is our movie going to be? You see there's like options for if we want to do 4K, if we want to do lower. Ideally, you create a movie at least at the size that you're targeting, if not a little larger, but usually just designing it for that specific size is what you want to do. Because when you create it, just remember you can't go higher afterwards, you know, with the quality, depending on what content you have. And it also changes the format of how the window is. So I'm choosing HD TV 1080 29.97 for the preset, which gives me a resolution of 1920 by 1080. So that is HD quality. Okay. Resolution right now, I'm going to set it to full. If you're on a slower machine, and we could change this at any time, this is for your previews of what you're looking at. You can always lower that down, and especially if you get to a point where you have like a lot of videos and effects, and it's doing blurs, and it's just it's starting to chug a bit. So looking at it, just like when you're in Maya and you're trying to do lighting, and you turn the test resolution down so it'll render faster. This is that same sort of deal. Now, I leave the starting time code alone, and the duration is basically your hours, minutes, seconds, and so on. I can always change that, and I'll be cropping that down, moving it up when I need to. So right now my duration is like a minute and 29 seconds or so, and that's totally fine. I'm not too worried about that part because I can always cut it down. I just want enough that I have enough time to do some of the things I want to do. So I could shorten it a lot more than this, because ultimately my composition is only going to be about 15 seconds long. So I could just say, instead of a minute and 30, I could just change this just to give me some wiggle room. Just make it 30 seconds. Okay. And for right now, I'm just going to use a white background color. Okay. Excellent. All looking good. We hit OK. I'll change the composition names later. And now I've got my my After Effects my first composition. You want to think of the compositions as like a folder or a group of different assets and things that I want to animate. And then what we're going to be doing is called nesting, which is where you take compositions and put them inside of each other. Okay, so when we're actually doing that, I might have sections of my my final movie in different compositions, and then I pull the compositions together and animate them together. But each one is its own separate thing. We'll go over that. But this is the first one. So let me just quickly show you the interface for a second. After Effects has a lot of menus, and you don't see all of them all at once. Okay, So just really fast, the main tools you see are up at the top left. Okay. And nicely, if I put my cursor over any of these tools, it tells me the name of the tool, and the little letter in parentheses is actually telling me what the shortcut key is. So we have the selection tool. We'll be using that a lot. You use it to select keyframes in the timeline. You use it to select things that are in the composition and be able to move them. But that's basically one of our primary tools. 90% of the time you're going to be on that tool. Okay. We have the hand tool, which is basically so that you can pan, right? I can also hold down my space bar and then left mouse button to pan things around. I can use my mouse roller, rolling in and out, to zoom in and out. I have my rotation tool, which the shortcut is W. And that's where if I have something in there, I have text, an Illustrator file, an image, I'd select this to rotate it. Or, which I'll show you in a few minutes, I would adjust, which I do more so, I would adjust its rotation through the properties inside of my timeline. I have the unified camera, and I have different camera tools. We'll talk about these more later, but basically these start to come into play when you start dealing with After Effects. Can actually work primarily works in 2D, but it can also work in 3D. So I can have what's called 3D layers. I can even have I can actually bring in 3D objects, lighting, cameras, everything from Maya, and pop it into After Effects. Okay. Or I could just have three-dimensional layers that actually I can fly between. I could even, if I had an image of the side of a building, I could actually take that, duplicate it 4 times, and have an actual building that I could fly around. And I could actually set up lights and have it cast shadows. So there's other ways, some of the things I would do. But you have to understand that a lot of these tools, the people using them, don't know all the other programs. Most people don't. Right? So sometimes people stick to 3D, sometimes they stick to video, occasionally they'll know both. The more programs you can learn and get very comfortable with, the better off you are, because it gives you an edge with other people, right? The next one is we have pan behind and anchor point. Let me shut this down for a second. Pan behind, or the anchor point tool, which is Y. We'll discuss what that one is, but the anchor point is to Maya the pivot point. So when I want to rotate something or move something, it's going to rotate off of that, wherever that anchor point is. That could be the difference of text rotating from the center or rotating from the side, and appearing to flip in and out three-dimensionally. Okay. Just this back up a little bit. After that, rectangle tool. And what these are primarily made for is you use these as mask. So when I'm making a we'll go over what's called a solid. I can mask it out into different shapes and make different things with it. If I have an image, then I'm actually trying to mask so it's just in an oval shape or something like that. I would use these to mask that out. It'll generate a mask, and I can actually animate mask, which are nice. The pen tool, you'll remember this. If I click on it, you'll see these are the tools from Illustrator. So once again, I can make shapes or mask just like in Illustrator. There's even a point where, let's say I have a person, or an object, and I filmed it, but I didn't film it with green screen, so I can't just key out the background. I could actually draw a mask around them and animate it so that it sticks to the person's body. It's painstaking, but I can animate it so it actually tweens and animates with the person masking out the background. Let's kind of browse through the text tool, which we will definitely be using today, where I can do horizontal or vertical text. The paintbrush tool, we'll get into some of these. This is getting a little like into some other stuff, but you have a paintbrush, a stamp tool, and an eraser tool. Very common with like Photoshop. A roto brush tool, we'll talk about that later. And a puppet pin tool. And that's kind of fun because you can actually, do you guys, well, probably not, but there was ages ago, before everything was so digital, you could make little two-dimensional puppets, or where you'd have little rotation joints on their elbows, their wrists, and their knees. I can do that and animate, like if I drew the parts of a character, the legs, the arms, and just wanted to animate them moving around, I could use the pin tool, and just, there are different ways I could animate them. So that's pretty neat. And toggle character paragraph. This guy, you'll notice, is changing the paragraph and the character tool, which we want on because we're going to be dealing with type first before anything else. And then all the way to the right, we have basically these different presets, and I could save my own. So when I look at libraries, these are all different presets, which reconfigures the user interface for After Effects, depending on what you plan on doing. Right now, I'm just using standard. And then all the way to the right, we have information windows. The preview is how you would actually play an animation you have. Right now, the presets of the character and paragraph is up. And I can always go to window up at the top and look at all of these different menus I can turn on to actually, they'll pop up on the right side for times I'm going to be working on stuff. To the left, we have the project folder. This is stuff that has been assets we've created, text, we have images, movies, sound will all show up inside of the project folder. I can make subfolders to organize them, which if you're working on a bigger project is a good idea. Like keep all my sounds in one folder, all my images in another folder, stuff like that. Otherwise, you're going to have like a billion things inside of here and it gets really confusing. If I expand this out, it actually gives me more information. Like on the composition, it's telling me what it is, because I might change the name from comp 1 to something else. So right here, it'll tell me, oh, this is a composition, it's 30 seconds long, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I also have an effects. I haven't created any yet. We will be in a few minutes. But the effects folder, so when I have a layer selected in my composition, the effects will show up up here, and then I'll have this bigger screen of where I can actually edit the effects. Just make sure, if you don't see like your composition, to go all the way to the left and click on project so that we can go back to the compositions that are in this file. And as I start creating compositions and bringing in movies in the center, this is where you choose what you want to look at, one of the places, and you'll start seeing them line up, or if I double click on them, it'll pop up and I can look at footage that's not even in my composition up here. This window right here is showing me my workspace, what I'm working on. So it's showing me the size of my, somewhat scaled down, but the size of my composition. And at the bottom of that window, we see preview from this view, primary viewer, use this. The primary viewer, use this, basically is if I have a dual monitor computer, when I'm previewing and I press play, my second monitor becomes my actual video output. So when I hit play, I would see it full screen, just like if I was watching it on TV or whatever, to see what it looks like. And as I scrub through, I could see it changing in real time. So this program is definitely designed to be much easier and have a better workflow when you have two monitors. It just is. Also at the bottom, how much am I scaled in? That's where it's 50%. That's how we're seeing this entire window in here. What time or preview time are we on? Taking a snapshot. So I could take a snapshot of a frame. I could put that back in to elongate it. So if I want to hold that frame for a while, if I want to just export it out. Show the snapshot. Show different channels and color management. Earlier when we were talking about resolution, this is where we change our resolution to speed things up. So if your machine starts chugging, you're working on an older machine at home or a laptop that's, getting a little long in the tooth, you can actually scale it down here and it'll speed things up. Or if you just have a lot of video content that's really big. Put this on the selection tool. So here, region of interest, transparency, active camera, if I have multiple cameras, or it comes with defaults, but most of these really only work for if I'm dealing with 3D. Okay. What different views? Once again, more 3D. And then we have flow charts and stuff like that. But for right now, that's pretty much what we're dealing with. Back in the composition folder at the bottom, this is where you would you can reinterpret footage, create a new folder, and create a new composition all at the bottom, or even delete it. And finally, the last thing at the bottom is our timeline. So I can have, as I create compositions, they'll show up in tabs here. This is all the content inside of them. And then I could scrub. We'll talk about what all these little doohickeys and things are in a second, or in a few minutes. But that basically is our general interface. Okay. Once again, I'm recording it, so don't feel bad. Any questions on that? Yes, sir. Hold on. Whilst I